Leroy, obviously, to any of us who are parents of teenagers or anyone, this is such a shocking story. But also, it's becoming such a frequent story. Teenagers murdered, possibly by other teenagers, in knife attacks.
Well, first, let me offer my condolences to the family whose year ended so tragically, and it's beginning even worse, having to go through this trauma. And it's unfortunately one too many, and it's been going on for decades. Unfortunately, knives have been used for decades. But in the late 90s, there was definitely a spike of knife crime. And as a result of that, I was in the Met at the time. I started a charity called Voyage Youth. It stands for Voice of the Youth and Gender Empowerment. And it was recognising that certain elements of the wider public find it difficult to resort, they find it easy to resort to violence when there's small differences, from insults to violence. And so we realise education is the key. So people knowing their rights and responsibilities, knowing how certain cofactors like the music, the videos, the computer games that glamorise violence can be, recognised. And so they're able to respond to those sort of differences without even making insults or getting into violence. And then we realised that social media was like an accelerant because, there might be differences between individuals in a scene, but social media takes it global, and some people's sphere of influence are saying, oh, you're going to let that person say that to you and so forth. So certain, and that's in the wider public, but there's a certain element that, our young people have bought into this, and it's been hijacked mainly. And there's a lot of brainwashing around. Then you have to think about the alcohol and drugs that cause young people or anyone to not be able to understand the extent of their actions, and especially if they're younger and if they're traumatized, because unfortunately, how often you walk along the streets of London or any towns that sit in the country and there's blue police tape, and asking for information on that stabbing or that shooting or that fatal injury. And so, we've got individual trauma and community trauma, and that's why I've done a lot of work around Youth Violence Commission on the public health approach to this. But, if you don't get into the causes of it, you're not really going to arrest your way out the problem or stop and search your way out the problem.
Well, I was going to say to you, 22 deaths in a year, of these kids, and this lovely-looking lad. We obviously don't know if he knew his attacker. We don't know if there was any sort of gang involvement because it's very early days. But what we do know, as you said, is these incidences are on the rise. London is particularly bad, but obviously there are many other areas in the country that are facing similar problems. If you were Sadiq Khan, if you were Sir Mark Rowley, what would you be doing?
They need to understand, as I just finished, you can't arrest your way out of this problem. You can't stop and search your way out of the problem. You have to know the cause of the crime. You have to understand the extent of how cultures, whether it's youth culture, the wider public culture, has been hijacked by the use of these cofactors I've already highlighted. And the other thing is that there needs to be close relationships between, especially the police and the target group of young people. That's why with Voyage Youth, we were working with officers, even in retirement. I was the chair for many years. I'm a patron for it now, but it's still going on, trying to work with young people to know they can be secure in speaking to officers. It's not about grassing on your mates. It's around investing in your community and not thinking that you're letting anyone down, speaking to officers and highlighting where there might be a feud, there might be a conflict, and not to underreport, because there's a big issue about underreporting a crime. And, it's bad enough when someone is killed, but there's so many injured with life-changing injuries, and they're not even going to police.
And Leroy, one of the things I've been told over the years, and I've never quite got my head around it, is that a lot of kids who carry knives, a lot of kids who put knives into other kids who stab people, don't fully understand that other kid could die, that there is this lack of sort of understanding that actually what you're holding in your hand is a lethal weapon. It can be as lethal as a gun, and that a lot of sort of surgeons and doctors have been going into schools and really explaining how easy it is to accidentally kill somebody, to try to explain to these kids that carrying a knife could end somebody else's life and could end your life. You could end up in prison for the rest of your life.
100%. In fact, I've done a lot of anti-gang work while I was in the Met and since retiring 10 years ago. And one of the things is this initiation process, because there's a lot of these artificial groups based on postcodes and other artificial barriers. And some of the initiation is to go and wet someone. That means stabbing them. And they think stabbing them in the buttock or the leg, they don't realise the femoral artery runs along there and other major blood vessels, and someone can easily bleed to death. And so these sort of things, again, it's glorified in social media and sometimes in the music. Now, I'm not saying that social media and music is the cause of it, but it's the cofactors. And they say, oh, that sounds good. Oh, let me try that. And it's crazy to think that someone could have a mindset to carry a knife, much less use it. And unfortunately, when you use a knife, you're more likely to not only use it, but be a victim of it. Yeah. And so we're finding that a lot of young people, because again, they're not trusting in statutory agencies, even teachers, other education establishments, even police officers. They're not saying, well, listen, I'm feeling threatened, I need some help. They need to talk. They need to recognise that these things can get totally out of hand. Because I've had young people where I've had to investigate and they've got a previous good character 1 second and they're suspected murderers the other.